insufficient. Needless to say, these factors combine to produce a potent brew of challenges for individual countries, for the region, and in a number of cases, for the world. Most concerning in this brew of challenges is the presence of militant extremism and an inclination by some groups to resolve problems by shooting rather than by merely shouting. Moreover, the desire of some states and extremist elements to obtain weapons of mass destruction amplifies the threats we confront, as do the malign activities of certain states in supporting violent proxies and the movement of extremist elements across state borders. In some states as well, the presence of immature government structures and uneven economic development puts extremists squarely in their element and undermines the traditional ties between people and their state. Above all, though, it is the unique combination of all these dangers and resources in the Central Command region that makes this area so critical to the security of all developed nations. Central Command is, in fact, the smallest of the 6 regional U.S. combatant commands, but it contains a disproportionate share of the world's challenges. These challenges are typically connected to each other, and our strategy must follow from an understanding of those connections. The nature of the problems we face and the linkages among them prompt us to adopt an overall approach that embodies 3 general concepts. The first of these reflects our recognition that our approach must be comprehensive. Achieving U.S. national goals and objectives and helping our partners achieve theirs as well requires more than just the traditional application of military power. Consequently, we need a whole-of-government approach, and we must work to partner with other U.S. governmental agencies and, as I'll note in a moment, to coordinate and engage with as many elements of partnering nations as is possible too. The second major aspect of our approach is that it must be sustained and enduring. None of the region's challenges have easy or simple solutions. The reality is that complex challenges require persistent effort and the implementation of nuanced, comprehensive solutions. There are no quick fixes to the challenges that exist in the CENTCOM AOR. The third and final strategic big idea that guides our approach is awareness that we must pursue cooperative, multilateral solutions to the challenges in the region. Undertaking multilateral activities in pursuit of common interests helps combine the diplomatic, economic, and military capabilities of many nations. These efforts also support building partner capabilities where required and seek to capitalize on the comparative advantages of all participants. In essence, then, the situation in the CENTCOM AOR requires a comprehensive, sustained, whole-of-governments, plural, approach to achieve American objectives and those of our partners. So those are the big ideas, the concepts that inform our thinking about how to deal with the challenges we face there. And based on them, we've developed and implemented an overall regional strategy that is, in essence, a comprehensive counterinsurgency strategy. We've done this because we recognize that countering terrorists and extremism requires more than just counter-terrorist forces. To be sure, 22 SAS, General Guthrie's old outfit, and its U.S. counterparts are truly national, if not international, assets. Absolutely extraordinary in what they can do. And we're privileged to have such elements operating in substantial numbers in the CENTCOM AOR. But as we relearned in Iraq, they cannot by themselves defeat an industrial strength extremist and insurgent problem. In fact, while counter-terrorist operations are critically important, they are but one of the many elements of the type of comprehensive whole-of-government counterinsurgency approach that is required to deal with the substantial challenges found in the CENTCOM AOR. A successful counterinsurgency strategy does, of course, have traditional offensive and defensive kinetic military components, including a subset that is the kind of operations associated with counter-terrorist forces. Conventional military operations obviously enable you to clear areas of extremist and insurgents elements, and together with special operations forces to stop them from putting themselves back together. The core of any counterinsurgency strategy, though, is that it must focus on the fact that the decisive terrain is the human terrain, not the high ground or river crossing, though those features do remain of importance. Focusing on the population can, if done properly, achieve a number of important effects. First and foremost, of course, it can improve the security of the population, which is all important, and thereby help local authorities extend basic services to the people. A population-centric focus can also help to delegitimize the methods of the extremists, especially if you can contrast your ability and willingness to support and protect the population with the often horrific actions of extremist groups. Indeed, exposing the extremist ideologies, indiscriminate violence, and oppressive practices of extremist movements can help the people realize that their lives are unlikely to be improved if under the control of such movements. For the strategy to work, moreover, it's also necessary to find ways to identify reconcilable members of insurgent elements and to transform them from being part of the problem to becoming part of the solution. That is not only important from a security standpoint in a local area, it's also important in generating the kind of momentum that can result in a spread of thinking that it is time to reject resistance and embrace political participation. The goal, of course, is to mobilize local opinion in opposition to violent ideologies. And on this point, I might note that it was my British deputy in Iraq, Lieutenant General Graham Lamb, also former 22 SAS, armed with lessons he had learned in Northern Ireland, who was one of those who was instrumental in the development of the concepts of reconciliation that enabled us to capitalize on the so-called Anbar awakening and to help transform it into a broader Sunni awakening in Iraq in 2007. I might note that Lieutenant General retired Sir Graham Lamb is now in Kabul, by the way, helping General Stan McChrystal develop concepts to guide the reintegration of reconcilables in Afghanistan. Well, having described the region and our general approach to the challenges in it, I'd like to walk around the AOR and discuss the situation in various of the countries and major subregions: Iraq, Afghanistan and Pakistan, Iran, the Arabian Peninsula, Egypt and the Levant, and lastly, Central Asia. In Iraq, security has improved dramatically over the last 2 years, though, as always, the situation does still remain fragile and reversible, certainly less so than when Ambassador Crocker and I first described the situation in such terms back in 2008. Insurgent attacks in Iraq in June 2007, for example, averaged over 160 per day. Since then, we've seen a steady decline in violence to the point that there are now around 20 or so attacks per day, even as we have moved U.S. forces out of the Iraqi cities and handed off security tasks to increasingly capable Iraqi security forces, though our elements still do, to be sure, support and, as requested, enable Iraqi forces with a variety of assets that their forces are still developing. In the past 2 years, there have also been similar declines in violent civilian deaths, high-profile attacks, and virtually every other security metric. But though the trends in Iraq have been uniformly positive, albeit with ups and downs, many challenges remain, and violence is still a part of the present-day Iraq, as we saw so tragically in the horrific car bombings conducted 3 weeks ago in Baghdad. Al-Qaeda Iraq and other Sunni extremist organizations are still present and periodically carry out such sensational attacks. Iranian-backed Shia extremist groups are also still present, and we have seen attacks with signature Iranian-provided weapons, such as explosively formed projectiles and rockets, on a daily basis. There are also, of course, continued Arab-Kurd, Sunni-Shia, intra-Shia, and intra-Sunni challenges, as well as budget pressures due to reduced oil prices, hundreds of thousands of Iraqis still displaced by the sectarian violence of past years, and still inadequate levels of basic services, though there have been records set recently in the production of electricity and in oil exports, significant increases in religious tourism, openings of major new hospitals,